So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Camille. I've been with Shrubs for about the last 5 years. I am the beekeeper on site, so I've got a special interest in honeybees. I'll try to do other pollinators as well, but you'll find me going off on tangents. Um, I work in the tree and shrub department, but kind of drift over to perennials and annuals and things like that as well. So I feel like I've got a pretty good grip on a lot of different varieties of plants that'll really help to fill out your garden and really help with the biodiversity and introducing pollinators into your yard. So this is the tree and shrub edition. Next week, you can stay tuned for the perennial and annual edition. So planting for pollinators, who is going to benefit from this? Basically, everybody benefits. It starts with you as the gardener, enjoying the plants that you have in your yard, enjoying the color and the textures and just the life that you have. And then everyone else is going to realize that you've got this wonderful piece of Eden as well. So your butterflies, your hoverflies, your beetles and your moths, your hummingbirds, your songbirds, and of course your bees are all going to benefit from the work that you do in your garden. It creates kind of a productive loop. You plant the flowers, the pollinators visit the flowers are promoted by the pollinators. The birds and the wind will distribute your seeds, and then they'll flower again next year. The cycle repeats, except for if you're planting your trees and your shrubs that are come back year after year, you can kind of get rid of the gardener plants the flowers and just continue on with the easy part of the loop here.
To say nothing of the weeds that they keep in.
Oh, the weeds are a whole different story. Good luck getting rid of those. But the denser your pollinator plants, the easier it is. You can plant pollinator plants that are technically weeds, and those will get rid of all of your other weeds. So always a good idea there. Just throw out some of
Yeah.
dandelions are great.
Yeah, different varieties are good friends.
We can plant some showy milkweed. That'll take care of just about any other weed out there. So why do pollinators need your help in the first place? Human intervention can be a good or a bad thing. It can commonly cause loss of habitat. It can cause loss of biodiverse foods. A lot of your monocultures and things are not a really great habitat for pollinators because they bloom all at once and then there's suddenly nothing and that goes fallow for the rest of the year. Increase in pesticide harm, loss of habitat, and spread of pests and diseases. So what you can do is you can create a safe space for pollinators in your own garden. You can create a biodiverse area. You can create good watering sources, a source of flower constancy. So all throughout the year, you'll have different plants and flowers blooming. There will be not necessarily any kind of dearth. The dearth is just a period where there's nothing really blooming, things are hungry, there's not a whole lot around. So if you can plant flowers that aren't generally blooming a certain time of year, say September, for instance, right now, if you plant things that are going to be blooming in September, that's going to be a huge help versus if you're planting stuff that blooms in May, everything's kind of blooming in May. So you're promoting feed at that point, but you're putting it on top of all the other feed. So plant stuff that's not necessarily in a bloom cycle where everything else is already blooming. Make sure you never spray plants with pesticides, herbicides that are currently in flower. You can spray things if they don't have any flowers on them, but if you have flowers on them and you spray a pesticide or an herbicide or anything chemical and damaging, the honeybees and other pollinators that visit those flowers will take those pesticides and chemicals back to their home, and that's going to really harm them. So make sure if you have to spray something, your roses have aphids, whatever it may be, that there are no flowers at the time that you spray. So in order to understand what to plant for your pollinators, you have to first understand the nature of your pollinators. Which pollinator are you trying to attract, and what do they personally like in your garden? So we've got all sorts of different pollinators here. We've got hummingbirds, we've got honeybees, we've got butterflies and moths, all sorts of different native bees, and hoverflies as well, which are actually a huge benefit to your garden and really good pollinators too. You can tell just because they're so hairy. So honeybees, this is my specialty, and I'm going to try not to bore everybody too much with these guys. They are not native to the US. They're imported from Europe. They are now completely dependent on medication and keeper management for control of pests and diseases. they can't really survive on their own with the encroachment of the varroa mite.
What do you need medication?
So there are certain medications organically based, like from the hop plant or from formic acid that's found in the poison of ants and honeybees as well. Also, medicines from the hop plant and the thyme plant. So all of these medications can help to keep the bees safe, but to kill the mites that are infecting them.
What's their range? What are these
The range.
range,
So
How
honey.
far do they travel from one?
It depends on the season. So honeybees, when they're hungry, can travel anywhere from 3 up until about 10 miles. If they're traveling 10 miles, they're in trouble and they need some help. But in early spring, when resources are plentiful, they'll stay as close to the hive as possible. So just a couple 100 feet even. This time of year, they're probably hitting around that 3 mile mark, depending on where they are, though.
Okay. Thank you.
So honeybees are social bees with extremely large colonies, larger than most of your native bees even. So they're 60 to 80,000 strong in summertime. And it's really important that you don't use your pesticides and things because they'll carry it back, and a couple of honeybees carrying pesticides back, that collapses the entire colony. Honeybees are incredible foragers, and they've been known to show flower constancy, which is why commercial agriculture values them so much. They will pick a large flower source and they will pollinate all of those flower sources and kind of ignore everything around it. So that's why they're great in orchards and things. So if you're trying to increase honeybee habitat in your yard, plant large drifts of the same flower. Autumn joy sedum is one of my favorites right now. Not a tree or shrub, it's a perennial, but they're flowering right now, and we have just huge drifts of them out in the garden center.
What
You can
is
see
it?
the honeybees everywhere. Autumn joy sedum.
Oh.
So native bees. Oregon is home to over 600 species of native bees. Most of them are solitary, but there are some that are social or eusocial. Your bumblebee, for instance, can have colonies up to about 300, and they actually nest in the ground. So if you're trying to encourage bumblebees to hang out in your garden, a little bit of messy fall garden is definitely okay. They like to overwinter in leaf debris. So as soon as it starts getting cold and rainy, they're going to be underneath your leaf matter. Leave some of the leaf matter in an area that doesn't really matter in your yard, and they'll overwinter there. Get rid of all your leaf matter, and you could get rid of a bunch of bumblebee queens. So be kind of careful about that. Depending on which native bee you're interested in, there's a whole variety out there, of course, but different plants will attract different native bees. Not all wool curder bees are native. Most of them are from Europe, but they're really interesting little critters. You'll see them on the middle photo right here, right underneath native bees. They are, I like to say, the chihuahua of bees. They are nice small bees, about the size of honeybee, but they will bully even the biggest bumblebees in the yard. They're very territorial. They won't hurt them. They'll just kind of bop them in the air. And the bumblebee will look at it like, dude, you're half my size. So they don't really hurt anything, but it's really fun to watch them. And they like really soft things. They're called wool carders because they build their nests with hair like wool from, honestly, they'll take it from sheep, they'll take it from different plants. If you plant a lamb's ear, they're going to love this sort of thing. Lots of different salvias have very hairy leaves.
How do they look different than yellow jack?
So yellow jackets are skinny and they don't have much hair on them. They're not really great pollinators because of the lack of hair. So all of your native bees are going to be extremely hairy. You'll see them carrying pollen on their legs or their backs or their stomachs. They also they behave differently. You can hear the difference. You can see the difference.
Yeah, I was talking about the wool carders in particular. Oh.
The wool carder in particular is really fat. So it's pretty easy to identify. Most of your yellow jackets are very skinny and they've got a really, really slim waistline. The wool carder bee is, it's a big guy.
Do you have lambs there in stock?
We may have some lamb's ear in stock. I think we have some native ones actually. So we could definitely take a look at any of the plants that you're interested in after class. I can take a tour for everybody. Mason bees require early blooming flowers. So you got to consider when your bees are going to be out. Mason bees are generally probably middle of February up until probably about the 1st of June. So that's their active window. You want to make sure that you have very, very early flowers for them. They love bulbs, they love early flowering fruit trees, that sort of thing. And mason bees really need mud in order to build. Like the wool carder bees take hairs from stachys and things like that. The mason bees will use clay mud for their nests. So important to have a little bit of bare space in your garden if you're interested in these guys.
So what are these bees feeding on during the rest of the year besides the early blooming time?
So mason bees actually spend most of their adult lives in cocoons. They don't feed at all. So about June 1st, all of the mature mason bees have laid all of their eggs. They've done everything they're going to do, and then they die off for the season. And then the baby mason bees will habitate inside their little clay house until about October, at which point they've eaten all they're going to eat. They've spun their cocoons. They're fully adult in October. And then they just kind of hang out in status until about mid-February again, and they hatch. So they spend most of their lives in cocoons. Bee active periods, we kind of already went over this. Your mason bee is good for fruit trees, bulbs. February through June is when the adults are out of the cocoon and active. Leaf cutter bees, actually really beneficial, even though they leave little chunks out of your rose leaves. They are usually active June through October, and they're the ones that are really pollinating all of your garden vegetables. Bumblebees and honeybees share a very similar active period, about March through October. Anytime temperatures are usually about 55 degrees consistently and not really raining.
So their lifespans are all, I think,
Not necessarily. When you're talking about the individual, the single bees, like your mason bees, your leafcutter bees, yes, they do have longer lifespans. When you're talking bumblebees and honeybees, we get into some different areas here. So your bumblebees, the workers are going to be periodically born and dying throughout the season, but the queen bumblebee will overwinter alone. So her entire colony dies out and she overwinters as an individual queen, which is why it's so important to protect them, because they usually have a family of about 300 and they're overwintering with one. Honeybees, on the other hand, will overwinter with somewhere around 15,000. So they stay in their colony throughout the year. Your honeybee workers usually last about 6 weeks in the summertime when they're actively foraging and they're really working and straining themselves. In the wintertime, they can live up to 3 months. But the queens can last about 3 years. So the lifespans get a little bit more in depth. Butterflies. So butterflies are wonderful pollinators. They have really wide ranges. They're really great at traveling long distances. They have longer tongues than most of your other pollinators, hummingbirds excluded. So that allows them to reach flowers in difficult locations and very, very deep nectaries. They're often reliant on very specific host plants for larval development. So you think about Asclepias for monarch caterpillars. Asclepias is not specific enough. You need Asclepias speciosa. So milkweed, it's not really going to help too much. Showy milkweed is what you want for the monarch butterflies. They're extremely specific. And showy milkweed is an Oregon native as well.
Showy milkweed, what environment does it thrive in? I mean, I know it all goes crazy, but.
So showy milkweed, they don't mind the clay soil so much. They don't mind the silt either. They're kind of a weed. They'll get away from you and they spread through rhizomes in the soil. So they will spread faster than a California poppy. Got to be kind of careful with them. Hummingbirds. All of your hummingbirds that we have around here are actually native. They're all native to the Americas. Certain hummingbirds will migrate, so we'll have most of our hummingbirds kind of disappear in the wintertime, but not all of them. The Anna's hummingbird actually sticks around. So this becomes important if you're trying to cater to the hummingbirds, have things that are blooming in the winter time, and your Anna's hummingbird is going to thank you. I've got 2 of them that overwinter in my hawthorn trees, and they love the pineapple sage I leave out for them.
The what trees?
Hawthorn trees. They nest in the hawthorn trees and then they come up for the pineapple sage, and then I do feed them in the winter as well. So herbs and sages are some of their favorites, but they're going for really specific, really long flowers as well. Anything that they can really get their beak and their tongue into. That being said, anything that's flowering in wintertime is going to be helpful for them because there's not a whole lot around. So we're going to go over camellias a little bit later, quite a bit later in the class. And even though the flower shape isn't right for hummingbirds, it's a really important flower for them because it flowers so heavily in the wintertime. So we've got many other pollinators that you can think about too. There are all sorts of different wasps that are minor pollinators. We have hoverflies. This little guy on the autumn joy sedum in the bottom corner is actually a black mason, or a black leafcutter bee. So creating a biodiverse garden, biodiversity really is the key to attracting many pollinators, having blooms all throughout the season. Being a messy gardener is not a bad thing, especially if you communicate to your neighbors, hey, I'm not trying to be messy here. I'm trying to cater to the pollinators. Dandelions can be a problem if you let them go too much. Maybe talk to your neighbor about these guys. But dandelions are a really important source of nectar and pollen for many of your pollinators. You'll see all kinds of wildlife on these guys. Daisies and yellow nutsedge in the lawns. Yes, everyone hates yellow nutsedge, but it's also a good pollinator plant. Clovers, purple dead nettle, self-heal, which is also native, all good things to have kind of just flowering in your lawn. Planting groupings or drifts rather than scattered. So like I was saying, some pollinators are flower constant. They'd rather have a big group of coreopsis in the corner. A couple of them will want to just kind of float around. Your mason bees are really good generalists. So rather than going to a specific flower grouping and ignoring everything else, they go out in a specific area from their nest. So it's good to be biodiverse in how you plant, what you plant. Remove and reduce monoculture plantings. Lawns on their own, just grasses, grass mixes, not super great for pollinators. So if you can mix some of those daisies in there, you can mix some of your self-heals and purple dead nettles in there, definitely makes it a lot more productive. Not all hedges are negative. You can actually find hedges that will bloom multiple times a year and still give you that privacy screen.
So I have a lawn that I don't water during the summer. Are there things that are basically drought resistant or can weather that?
Yes,
cycle?
actually. It depends on how large of a plant you can stand in your lawn, but if you're not doing summer irrigating, you're letting your lawn die back and you want a couple things just to kind of pop out in there, your dandelions are great. Your self-heal will continue to grow. There are California poppies. I know California poppies can be a little bit too big, but if you kind of spread them out in your yard and you keep them contained to your yard and not your neighbor's yard, they'll actually bloom in springtime. They'll bloom in late summer. I've got several of them blooming in my lawn right now, as long as I'm careful not to let them into my neighbor's yard.
Thank you.
They are a massive need, but they're wonderful. So some of your good hedges, Escallonia, late flowering Abelia, sweet box, depending on if you have sun or shade. Escallonia will bloom multiple times in the year, and it kind of has a mind of its own. Sometimes it'll bloom when it's not supposed to. So it'll bloom mainly in the spring, but it'll also have a later bloom in late fall, early winter. Your sweet box loves the shade, and it's called a sweet box because it's a good boxwood substitute. You think of this big ugly boxwood and you can trim it however you want. You can make it a square, you can make it a circle, whatever. You can do the same with the sweet box, but the sweet box is going to bloom January, February, and it's going to be a really important pollinator plant for shady areas. And also really nice for a nice organized yard. So providing water is something that's really important. We don't really think about it here in Oregon because, well, we had thunder showers last night. There's plenty of water everywhere. But providing consistent water is something that will really attract pollinators to your garden. If you have a garden spot that you water every single day and you always have it nice and moist, that's a good source for like butterflies and things that like a little bit of safe water where they're not afraid of drowning. A pet water bowl can be handy, especially if you change out the water every day. This pet water bowl is actually in my yard. I've just got a piece of obsidian in it to prevent drowning. And it's on my watering loop. So when I'm watering all of my ferns and things, I hit this and the water continues to be fresh day after day. Different pollinators can like different types of water sources. So your butterflies really like just plain muddy water. Your hummingbirds like running water, really fresh, clean water. They're very sensitive to any kind of toxicity. So running water is just something that's more comfortable for them. Same with cats and things. Your honeybees tend to like things where they feel very confident they're not going to drown. Honeybees know that they're not good swimmers. They understand this very well. So if you've got a little bit of moss on a rock or something and you keep that mossy rock pretty well watered, moss seems to be one of their favorite drinking water holes. So the reasons that pollinators are going to visit different flowers are for two different resources, your nectar and your pollen. So the nectar is basically a carbohydrate. It's a sugar that's really important to most of your pollinators. Not all pollinators will collect pollen, but they're all going to be collecting nectar. Not all plants have nectar though. Nectar is something that the plant is trying to bring the pollinator in with. They are luring your pollinator in. They say, I need an insect to pollinate me. So here's something in return. They have a symbiotic relationship. Things that are wind pollinated, they don't necessarily need any insects to reproduce, like hazelnuts and grasses, lack this resource. But everything has pollen. Everything has to have pollen. And not all pollinators will actually go for pollen. Honeybees are probably the biggest collectors of pollen out there, but all of your native bees and things are really going to need this as well. Got kind of an interesting flower down here. This is actually an Oregon native, Colomia grandiflora. If you see this planted in your yard, check out the pollinators on there and check out the anthers of the flowers. It has bright blue pollen. So just kind of an interesting plant.
What's the shape of the plant?
Not too tall. They have kind of rounded flowers on them. It reminds me a bit of a sunflower, how they're kind of spaced around the flower head.
So is it a perennial or a shrub?
It is a perennial. I just had to throw it in here because the blue pollen was too cool. So pollen is the key to pollination. Even if a pollinator is only going for the nectaries, they have to brush past the anthers in order to access those nectaries. And then like hummingbirds, for instance, who are only going for nectar, the pollen will get brushed up on their head. And then the next flower they visit, they're going to brush that pollen onto their head again. They're going to transfer pollen from flower to flower as they're collecting their nectar. Color, shape, scent, and season. A variety of flower colors and shapes are required to attract the variety of pollinators. Everybody's got their own preferences. Some pollinators really go for smell. Bees are particularly smell oriented, most others are not. Your hummingbirds are going to go for flower shape and vibrance of color. Your butterflies are going to go for multiple flower heads and easy to find nectaries. Whenever possible, plant native though. If you're going for native pollinators, they're going to recognize your native plants. So pollinator preferences for honeybees. It's kind of fun to go out in your garden with the UV light and check out all the flowers, because sometimes there are invisible UV markings on your flowers that act as landing pads for honeybees. So if you go out with a UV light, you might see different shapes on the flowers that you didn't know were there. That being said, sweet scented flowers are effective to attract bees. I was talking about sweet box earlier. This is kind of the exception. Sweet box blooms at a time where not many bees are actually active. So the sweet smell is great for the gardener, but doesn't really benefit the bees as much, just because of the time it's blooming. So open flower shape and easy access to nectaries are preferred, but you're going to see bees forage on all sorts of hilarious things. If you've ever seen a bee try to forage on a hosta flower, the nectaries are too deep. They try as hard as they can. They just can't quite fit in. So consider the shape, consider ease of access to the nectaries. Avoid showy double blooming plants. So if the flower looks like a ballerina skirt and you can't actually see the nectaries, it's going to be really hard for pollination to happen, really hard for anything to really benefit from those flowers. So flowering cherry is a perfect example of this. It's possible, but they're going to work a lot harder than they should to get to those nectaries. Some native solitary bees, like mason bees, for instance, will use large bell-shaped flowers as mating chambers. So if you have foxglove around your house, that's a good mating site for your native bees. Bed and breakfast. So butterflies, they don't really have a response to scent. They don't really care about that at all. You see one on a Mexican orange, that's purely coincidental. It does not care about scent. They are attracted to deep, striking colors, very, very vivid. The more vivid you can get them, the more they're going to be interested. Reds, purples, and oranges are great to attract them. And they prefer large groupings of plant that are easily accessible with short bursts of energy. They are going to be really specific to certain flowers. So not all butterflies are super, super specific. The monarch is probably the most specific, not wanting just a milkweed, but wanting the showy milkweed in particular. We're looking for flowers with large clusters of blooms for their feeding. They'll feed on nectar. They don't necessarily collect pollen, but they will spread it from flower to flower on their hairy bodies. So coneflower, black-eyed Susan, they're really going to go after all of these. Buddleia is aptly named the butterfly bush because the shape of the flowers are perfect. The vivid colors of the flowers really attract them. And you're going to see swallowtails flocking to your yard if you plant these guys. Notable about Buddleia, it was banned for sale if it is a fertile plant in, I think, 2011. So all the cultivars you're seeing in all of your garden centers are sterile varieties and they will not get out of control. So that's the reason why you're not seeing the big 15-footers anymore, is you can't buy them. They're actually banned in Oregon.
So if I have one that just showed up in my yard,
It's possible if you have one that just showed up in your yard that it might be the one we're trying to get rid of. You can bring a sample in tomorrow and we can take a look at it and see if we can identify the exact species. Hummingbirds, again, no response to scent. They'll respond to really vivid colors, reds, oranges, pinks, and fuchsias. They prefer long tubular flowers. So if you think about the shape of their beak, if you have a flower that's about as the depth of their beak, that's what they're kind of going for. And because they are such a presence here in the US, a lot of flowers have actually co-evolved with the hummingbird. So hummingbirds and these flowers just sort of go together hand in hand. So fuchsias, salvias, bee balms, red hot pokers, trumpet vines, all of these have really long flowers that are perfect for hummingbird visitation. A native shrub, this is a really fun one. We've actually got one in the display garden, so you guys can go check it out later. Ribes sanguineum, the red flowering currant, is a good signal for the return of the migratory hummingbirds. It's a native plant. They've been coming back for year after year after year. The migratory hummingbirds will come back for the Ribes sanguineum. So if you're a hummingbird fan, that's probably one of the coolest plants to have in your yard. And again, the Anna's hummingbird does not migrate, so winter blooms are definitely critical for it. Your Oregon grape right here is a really wonderful resource. There are several different sizes, so you can get ground cover sizes or you can get tall sizes up to about 5 feet. So we've gone through a lot in the last couple of slides, but your top pollinator plants will all share these different points. They are attractive, easy landscape plants. If you appreciate the plant, you're going to care for the plant. And if you're caring for the plant, it's going to be healthy and it's going to be attractive to your pollinators. Top pollinator plants will attract multiple types of pollinators. So it's good to have different flower shapes, different flower sizes, and different flowering times. A long blooming period is important, but if you have a short blooming period and a really critical time, that's also really important. So kind of balance what you're looking for here. Do I want something that's blooming in September? Yes. Do I want something that's blooming in May and blooming all the way through September? That's still great. But if it's only blooming in May, there's so much other blooming in May that you're not really doing too much there. Make sure that the plants that you're planting actually have nectar and pollen resources. There are some plants out there that have been so heavily bred that they actually lack these flower parts. So Forsythia is probably the most dominant out there. Beautiful blooms, really, really early springs, just this huge yellow shrub. Absolutely useless. It has no nectaries, it has no pollen, it has no food resources whatsoever. Top pollinator plants, I think I already mentioned this point, definitely attractive to the gardener. So you're taking care of the plants are taking care of you. So we've gotten through who the pollinators are, what the pollinator preferences are. Now I'm going to go through just a couple of options.
these
I don't have a printout of this particular, but I do have this right here. So you can find this on our website too, under our blog page. There we go. But this goes over, this is one of my favorite handouts actually. What blooms when? So we've got winter here, we've got summer here, we've got fall and spring. So depending on what season you're planting for, you can pick a couple of different things from these handouts, and there's enough for everybody over here. Another one, my favorite one actually from OSU is right here. See if I can get that on the screen. And we've got enough for everybody here as well. The cool thing what OSU did here is these are all organ natives. We've got different sizes for different areas of your yard. We have a dry area, we have a wet area, we have a shade, we have a sun. So this gives a really great idea of what you can plant where in your yard. And on the other side, it has bloom times and bloom colors. So this is my absolute favorite handout. I give it to everybody I see. So full sun conditions, we're going to be looking at things that are flowering in the early nectar dearth before everything else really comes into flower. And we're also going to be looking at late flowering things after the summer heat has taken most of the blooms away, and things that are really going to supplement your pollinators' food sources. So full sun and early flowering. Mexican orange is a wonderful choice, and it's actually a really variable plant, so it's kind of cool. If you don't like one, you may like a different one. Typically, these shrubs are about 6 to 10 feet. They are somewhat rounded. They take care of themselves pretty easily, but you can prune them too. I've seen these guys pruned into spheres, pruned into rectangles. They'll take a prune really well. They have extremely scented flowers, so they're great for honeybees. I see all sorts of different native bees on here also. I do see butterfly visitations. The scent doesn't do anything for the butterflies, but the multitude of flowers in the Mexican orange is really nice. They are evergreen, so they're a good privacy hedge. They are extremely drought tolerant, also deer tolerant. Apparently they don't really like oranges. This is a great plant for hedging. Like I said, you can let it do its own thing, 6 to 10 feet rounded shrub, or you can prune it into whatever size or shape you're looking for.
Is it a fairly fast grower?
This one's kind of a medium grower. I don't have inches per year on me at the moment, but we can definitely discuss that after.
I'm just wondering if it's a hedge, does it have to be trimmed off?
About once a year usually with these guys.
I planted a few 2 years ago, and they were only about 2 feet high. They're about 4 feet high now.
Excellent.
They're beautiful.
The cool thing about these two is there is a yellow version, a green version, the thick leaf version that you see over here on the side, and then in the center we have a really thin leaf version. So there's a lot of different shapes and sizes that you can find in these guys. Espalonia has got to be one of my favorites. This seems to take the cake for every category under the sun. It is somewhat deer tolerant. That's probably its most lacking thing. Is it's deer tolerant, but they will graze on it once in a while. It grows fast enough, it's not the end of the world. This plant will attract hummingbirds. The flowers are deep enough for hummingbirds. They will attract all sorts of different bees. They will attract butterflies. There's large clumps of flowers. The nectaries are shallow enough that bees can access them, as well as your hummingbirds, which like the deeper nectaries. This is an easy shrub to prune. You can use it as a privacy screen. There are certain varieties that only get 2 or 3 feet tall, so you can use it as a front to your garden as well. The pink princess is what's photographed right here, and this is the one that's probably going to get somewhere between 5 and 8 feet. Full sun, evergreen, multiple bloom cycles, blooms heavy in spring. We'll have another smaller bloom sometime in fall, which will kind of ebb into winter. Well-draining soil is great for it. Fertilize it in springtime, and it's going to treat you really well. Ceanothus, or California lilac. These guys are very drought tolerant, very deer tolerant. They do really great on the coast as well. So they'll handle the wetter conditions also, in addition to being drought tolerant. Depending on varieties, you can get something that's only going to get about 4 feet tall. I think it's Vanderburg, I think is the one that I'm looking for the 4-footer. You can look at Zanzibar, which is a variegated version. It's kind of a yellow leaf, and that one's going to get somewhere around 12 feet tall. The one that we typically see is Victorian. It's about 8 to 10 feet. So there's quite a range of different ceanothus that you can buy. They flower very heavily in early to mid-spring. And if you prune them back right after the flowers are done, sometimes you'll get a second flower on there. So beautiful shrub, easy to care for, great on the coast. The flowering quince, one of the earlier blooming ones. You can get quince that have thorns or don't have thorns. There's a lot of different varieties out there. So if you want to put it on the edge of your fence and keep the neighbor's dog away, thorns are great. You want to put it right up next to your house, maybe thornless is a better option for you. Full sun, these are deciduous, so don't use them as a hedging plant. Use them as a more of a seasonal decoration. They are deer tolerant, drought tolerant. They don't care about poor soils. My sister has one that's about 8 feet tall, middle of California, dry caked sun. She never waters it. So it does just fine, even with a brown thumb. I say brown thumb, she's got me love. Early flowering manzanitas. Manzanitas can sometimes flower multiple times too. So you're going to have the heaviest flower early spring. You may have a smaller reflower in fall. There's a lot of different varieties out there. Lots of different shapes, lots of different sizes. Really interesting plant too, because you see the red bark on there. You also see, if you look really closely at the leaves, most of the time you've got a dark leaf on top and you've got a lighter leaf on the bottom. Manzanitas are upside down. So if you look at the leaf, you can tell like there's something funny going on with this plant. They actually have upside down leaves. So kind of a cool conversation starter on these guys. Drought tolerant, deer tolerant. They love poor soils. They're great for erosion control. They're good on the coast too. They can withstand both the wind and the salt. They're probably not going to get as tall as the tag says on the coast because of wind conditions, but they'll still do really well. So interesting thing about their flowers, they've got little tiny bell-shaped flowers, not super great for honeybees because they have a hard time accessing the nectaries. Here's where it doesn't make any sense. Hard to reach for honeybees. Bumblebees love them. Bumblebees will go for all sorts of things that they shouldn't go for. They are not supposed to be able to fly based on what their bodies look like. They're not supposed to be able to get into blueberry flowers and manzanita flowers, and here we go. Bumblebees are just absolutely fascinating. They break all the rules. Thing about manzanita is they are notoriously slow growing. So if you're going to buy a manzanita, be happy with how it looks right now because you're going to be looking at it for a while. And the way that bumblebees will sometimes get into these flowers that they're really not supposed to is they'll cheat. They will actually chew a little hole at the top of the flower and go straight into the nectaries. Kind of doesn't work so well for pollination, but they still get what they need. So a lot of things that people don't really think about, maples. Maples are actually a huge nectar resource for many bees in the area. They bloom early enough that sometimes we get rained out and it's kind of a wash. But acers actually have really, really small flowers on them. The red maple here and the Japanese maple have very small flowers. If you're looking into the big leaf maple, you may have seen, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but the big leaf maple has giant flowers on it in early spring, and it's one of the largest honey flows for beekeepers if you make it without any rain. So it only happens once every couple of years, but that's the first major honey flow. Everyone talks about honeybees and blackberries. Well, maples are a huge thing too. So there's a lot of different cultivars out there, lots of different shapes. Maybe you want something kind of pyramidal, maybe you want something columnar or something rounded. There's basically a maple out there for everybody, anywhere from about 30 to 60 feet tall on these guys. And we're just bringing a fall crop in, so you guys can check it out too. Willows. Willows are mostly wind pollinated, so they don't have really a whole lot of nectar to them, but they do have a lot of pollen. The thing about wind pollinated things is the wind has to carry the pollen, so you have to have an excess of pollen in order to actually spread. You can get small shrub varieties, you can get tree varieties. Small shrub varieties are really nice. They are just a little easier to deal with. A lot of your willows are going to grow very quickly. They're going to be very brittle. They're going to have hollow stems. So if you're trying to get a weeping willow, make sure to put it way off the road. Don't be underneath any of the branches. They do have a tendency to be extremely messy. And most of your trees, they lose their leaves and fall. Willows lose their leaves year round. So even if they're currently actively growing, they're going to be dumping leaves everywhere. My yard is a huge mess. They're wonderful for pollen resources. They're great for actually fertilization needs too. You can make fertilizers out of their leaves, but we'll get into that at a different class. So pussy willow is a fun one to have in early spring. They've got those really big white puffballs on them. The dappled willow is great for seasonal interest. They have wonderful catkins on them for good pollen resources, and they turn pink in later summer. So that's kind of fun. Really good to have as a flowering tree in your front yard. The golden chain tree, or Vasi. It's a wonderful shrub to have as long as you have the space. It's going to get 15 to 20 feet tall, and it will spread through suckers. So you'll probably have to attack the suckers once or twice a year. It does take a little bit of maintenance, but it is a beautiful tree. Usually flowers sometime around Mother's Day. So these are great gifts for Mother's Day too. Let's see. Oh yeah, I forgot about this part. We always sell out of them before I get to see the Chinese lanterns, but they have the flower and then they have the lantern state as well. The purple robed locust is probably one of the top bee plants that we have on site right here. They have a very short bloom time, usually about 2 weeks, but you can hear purple robe locust or black locust before you actually see the tree. Because when they are flowering, they are so dense with bees that you hear the buzz before you actually see the tree. They are very deciduous. They're in the pea family. They do have nasty thorns, so be very careful if you're pruning these guys. Short bloom cycle, extremely high volumes of nectar, less weed potential than the black robe, the black locust. The purple robe is just a little bit more, I guess, well behaved. I like the flowers on it a little bit better. It's going to be slightly smaller tree. You see a lot of your black locusts, they're 60, 70 feet tall. These guys are just going to be a little easier to handle. Fruit trees. All of your fruit trees are wonderful for pollinators. Your ornamental fruit trees, some of them are good and some of them are not as good. So look for production varieties wrapped on the dwarf or semi-dwarf rootstocks. The rootstock kind of it makes the difference whether or not the tree is going to be huge or not. So your dwarf rootstock typically grows about 12 feet. Your semi-dwarf is going to be closer to about 15, 16 feet. They have huge amounts of nectar and pollen. Just the tree is so large that it's easy for all of your pollinators to find these guys and go, hey, smorgasbord, the game is on. Plums are probably some of the earliest. So those are really, really wonderful for your mason bees and your very early native bees. But again, avoid your showy double flower varieties. The bottom picture you see here, you've got that kind of ballerina looking flower, and it's going to be difficult for pollinators to actually access those nectaries. They're still going to be attracted to it. The scent is there, the color is there, but they're going to have to work really hard to actually get into those flowers. They are quite a bit of work though. So if you plan on getting one of these trees, understand that you're going to have to be spraying fungicide in the wintertime. You're going to have to be pruning. You're going to have to be probably picking up quite a bit of fruit. So don't just jump in and grab a fruit tree. There's definitely a lot to think about there. Getting into late flowering things. So we're talking after the summer sun has really hit its peak, everything's starting to kind of dry out. Your spring flowers are kind of finishing off. Cistus is a really wonderful varied plant. You can find all sorts of different sizes and shapes and colors. White flowers, pink flowers with red centers. There's basically something for everyone with the cistus. The top photo you see here, this is called a Mickey cistus, and it's the smallest one that I've ever seen. It gets probably about 18 inches to 2 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. So this is a really good foreground plant. They are semi-evergreen, so they'll slim down in winter. They'll look a little bit leggy, but they won't actually lose all of their leaves. The Mickey cistus here, you see it in summer bloom, and it's just got a little bit of variegated growth on it. Looks pretty nice. In wintertime, they change their colors, and the cold actually changes the leaves to oranges and reds. So this is a really interesting one, even in wintertime. Full sun to part sun. Full sun is great, but they'll handle part sun also. Extremely deer tolerant. I talk about things like, oh, deer tolerant, deer will still graze on stuff. This is probably the plant out of any plant that I know of that the deer are gonna look at that and go, eh. If you touch the leaves, they're sticky, they're soapy, they're hairy. It's just not really attractive to a deer's tongue at all. Personally, I don't like touching them with my ungloved hand either. If I prune them, I always wear gloves. Vitex or the chase tree. I've got a couple of these on site right now in bloom. They're absolutely gorgeous. You definitely have to have the space for them. There are dwarf varieties, but most of them are going to be somewhere around 12 feet tall. So these are a really good showstopper plant for the front yard, or just a plant to put kind of in the center of a grouping of other things. So fully deciduous, it will be just sticks in wintertime. Tolerates drought, deer. This is a decent coastal plant too, because it'll tolerate your salty conditions. Avoid high traffic areas because the branches on the vitex are brittle. So if you're going to be running by it a whole bunch, you've got kids running around trying to climb it, probably not the best plant for it. But if you've got a nice little spot in the corner, it's not really going to be bothered. This is a really wonderful plant to have around. And you'll see all sorts of different pollinators going for this. You'll see bees on it, you'll see butterflies on it. I've seen hummingbirds go after it as well. Caryopteris is another one of my favorites. There are a lot of different varieties out there, called bluebeard, but if you really look, you can find the pink variety too. So pavilion pink only gets about 2 feet tall. It's one of the smaller ones, but it can be a little difficult to find. Most of your Caryopteris is going to be between the 2-3 foot range. They are brittle again, so be careful about high traffic areas. Fully deciduous, but they are huge attractors to pollinators. And if you see all of the anthers poking up all over the place, the butterflies are really going to be attracted to these guys also. This is the buddleia, or the butterfly bush. Full sun, lots of different varieties out there. We don't have the gigantic varieties that spread easily. We only have sterile versions that won't get out. So your 2 to 3 foot, your blue chip, your 6 to 7 foot is probably the tallest that I've seen in a while. Asian moon. There are red varieties out there as well. Miss Molly and Miss Ruby come to mind. They're somewhere in the 6 foot range. So a couple different colors. They're really easy to deadhead. If you see the configuration in this larger photo here, we've got one large flower spike, and right below that flower spike, we've got 2 more flower spikes coming out. So the moment this flower spike is done, you just chop that off, and then you've got 2 flowers to replace that one. Swallowtail butterflies are super, super attracted to this bush. If there's no swallowtails anywhere around, you put a buddleia out there, suddenly the swallowtail's around. So this is a really important plant for the swallowtails in particular, but you see all sorts of different pollinators on these guys too. Hummingbirds love it, bees love it. You'll see all kinds of things on buddleia. Plethora, or summer sweet. There are white versions and pink versions. They have fantastic fall color. Fully deciduous, really great for wet soils. They don't mind clay. Full sun to part shade. And they're pretty easy to prune too. So if you don't quite like the shape or the size, they'll handle a bit of pruning. The faded flower spikes are kind of interesting for cut flower arrangements too. So they dry really well. And I'm mentioning Escallonia again. I mentioned it earlier in the early blooming. I'm going to mention again in the late blooming because they usually do have a second bloom time. It looks like this is exactly the same slide here, but it's a great hedge, multiple bloom times, easy to prune, evergreen. Heptacodium is a really interesting plant that a lot of people don't know about, also called the Seven Suns tree. Brittle branches make it a little bit difficult to put in high traffic areas, but there's a good variety out there. You can find it in single trunk variety, going to get somewhere between 12 and 15 feet, or you can find it in multi-trunk varieties. Sometimes you can find a dwarf out there, but I haven't seen them in a while. Full sun to part sun. They are fully deciduous. They have a very long dormancy period. So if you're wandering around your garden in, say, May, and it still doesn't have any leaves on, don't worry. It just has an extra long dormancy period because it has such a late blooming cycle. Very deer tolerant, very drought tolerant. It looks like they have 2 bloom cycles, but they don't. So what's going on here is this is an extra benefit for the gardener, not necessarily for your pollinators. Your first round of blooms, I've got a heptacodium out there right now that's in bloom, is pure white. And it's just like the purple robe locust. You will hear the tree before you actually see it because the pollinators flock to it so heavily. So pure white blooms when it's in full bloom. After the bloom is finished, it looks like it's blooming again in pink, but those are actually just the leftover flower bracts. So it's an added bonus for the gardener. It's not actually blooming again. Crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtle is an interesting one, and I've heard multiple different things about it. They have been heavily bred, so pay attention to the tag. It's a good idea to buy crepe myrtles when they're blooming. They're blooming right now, so that's definitely nice. But take a look at the flowers really closely. Make sure that they actually have active nectaries and active anthers. You can kind of rub the anther with your thumb and get a little bit of pollen on your thumb. Some varieties are sterile. So some varieties lack the flower parts needed to produce nectar and pollen, kind of like the forsythia. Your less bred varieties, I think indica comes to mind. They are actually going to be a really nice pollen resource. And you'll see bees flocking to both varieties because they still have all of the traits that make them stand out to a pollinator, whether or not they have those active nectaries. So always a good idea to take a quick look and just look at the flowers before you buy these guys.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
The city's been planting those.
Uh-huh.
Do you happen to know if they're trying to go for ones that are pollinator
I
friendly?
don't know the varieties they're using, but you can definitely walk down the street when they're in bloom and you can see for yourself. I haven't actually seen where they're planting them.
Can you review when you're looking at the flowers, what you're supposed to see to be able to tell it's producing nectar and pollen?
So when you're looking at the flowers, you can get a little bit of pollen on your thumb. Just rub your thumb across the anthers on the flower. So the little yellow parts that you see in the photo here, you should get a little bit of dust on your finger. It's not much, so you'll really have to look, but you can actually tell like, oh yeah, this one does produce. These are beautiful flowers. All of your neighbors are going to be going, hey, I need one of those. I need one of these in my yard. But there is one caveat to the crepe myrtle. They have an extremely long dormancy period. So May goes by and it still looks dead. It leaves out very, very late. It has a long dormancy period, so it's good to have multiple things planted around it. So in early spring, you still have a bunch of living, beautiful flowering things around because it's just going to look like a stick until probably mid-spring. Yeah.
I have always wondered about this. In the South, you prune crepe myrtles back so far.
Interesting.
You just sliced off the top of them.
Okay.
I mean, I can just remember that. So what's the deal?
So here in the Pacific Northwest, we're right on the edge of their hardiness zone, and we don't prune them at all. If we prune them at all, we're pruning just the little flower bits off from last year. Because they're right on the edge of our hardiness zone, sometimes we get years where they don't flower at all. So if you prune them back, you're going to set them back far enough that you're going to probably go a couple years without flower. So pruning is extremely minimal on the crepe myrtles here, just because we're kind of teasing the edge of their hardiness zone.
That makes so much.
So easy on the pruning at least. Ruffled flowers do not make for perfect access, but the seasonality is what really brings these guys apart from other pollinator plants. They're just starting to bloom probably 2 weeks ago or so, so end of August. And they're going to bloom for another couple of weeks here when not much else is really going on. There are several different varieties and different sizes. If you find Bellini series, there's a Bellini grape and a Bellini raspberry. Those are dwarf varieties and they're only really going to reach about 4 feet tall. Most of your crepe myrtles are going to be in single or multi-trunk, and they're going to get somewhere around 25 feet tall. All right, so let's look at some shady areas. Early flowering and late flowering. Starting with early, Japanese maples, there are just an astounding number of varieties out there. Anything that you can think of, we probably have Japanese maple to match that. The Japanese maple flowers are extremely small, so they're great for native bees, but the honeybees don't really seem to go after them as much. I've got a little photo here in the center of a red flowering Japanese maple right here. They come in a variety of different sizes and shapes and orientations. So you may want a horizontal tree, you may want a vertical tree. You may want a tree that's going to get 5 feet tall and 8 feet wide. You may want a tree that's only going to get maybe 10 feet wide and 30 feet tall. So lots of different variations, lots of different training and pruning methods on these guys. Be kind of careful with Japanese maples because they really will burn in the afternoon sun unless you get very specific varieties. So morning sun is wonderful for these guys, but avoid the afternoon sun on most of these. Vine maples, Oregon native, quite tall. They can get up to 20 feet tall. It depends on where they are, whether or not they're getting more sun, less sun. They may stay shorter or get taller depending on variety and depending on location rather. Afternoon shade is definitely preferred, but you see these guys growing in dense forests all over the place. If you go up to Mary's Peak, you'll see vine maples everywhere. Moist soil is best. You can find these in multi-trunk or single trunk varieties. Most of them are multi-trunk, so it's kind of harder to find the single trunk, but they do exist out there. The big leaf maple, this is the big one. You can see flower spikes on these guys that are almost a foot long. So they have very large flowers on them. You don't usually think of maples as flowering, but these guys stand out. They can be 40 to 75 feet tall. They are massive trees. Another Oregon native. They are the first major nectar flow of spring. So you know spring is here once these guys start to bloom. A lot of the time this happens when we're still getting heavy rains. So it may be really beneficial for all your pollinators out there, or it might be kind of a flop if it rains the whole time they're blooming. But if you've ever tried big leaf maple honey, it is the wildest thing I've ever tasted. You think of most honey as being thick and syrupy and sweet. It's peppery. If you ever see it, check it out. But it only happens every couple of years that beekeepers actually get to harvest it.
Do you know where in town you can get it commercially? Because I've heard about this too.
I don't know where you can get it commercially. I know that Oso Honey Farms will have it from every now and then. We had it a couple of years ago.
They're also starting to make a syrup from big leaf maples where they have big skins of it.
Oh,
I
interesting.
keep wanting to try that too, but I still haven't.
It definitely shortens the lifespan of the tree tapping it for syrup. I don't know too much about it. We do have some sugar maples on site that are specifically for that though.
Yeah.
Acer saccharides. Shady area early flowering. Azaleas are wonderful. They are some of the most floriferous early shrubs that we have. They have a couple caveats. They want extremely acidic soils. And in recent years, we've had problems with azalea lacewing. So if you see kind of dirty, muddled leaves, like the bottom photo right here, you may need to spray before they bloom. You don't. For azalea lacewing, you can use pyrethrins, you can use neem, a variety of different things. But you don't ever want to spray anything when they're in flower. So if they're in flower, your leaves look like this, you have to wait until the blooms are gone and then you can spray. Even if the leaves look this bad, chances are you can still get the population under control and the plant will be fine. You just might not have blooms that are as robust. It's more of a visual thing until it gets really, really bad.
Is there a systemic you can put on, or is it?
I don't recommend using any systemics on anything blooming ever. Only sprays. So the sprays don't last very long. And if you spray at the wrong time, it's still not a great thing. But if you use a systemic at the wrong time, they last a really long time. Suddenly your flowers have got that systemic in them too. And then all of the pollinators that visit take that home and you're really damaging them. So systemics, if you're going to be using them, are usually used in wintertime. But with these, I usually recommend just leaf sprays after the blooms are done or before the blooms have set. The thing about when the blooms are setting is you're looking at bud burst or pinking. So if you've got a whole bunch of buds that are getting ready to bloom, you see azalea lacewing, like, oh gosh, the buds are getting ready to open. If there's no color on the buds, look around and see if there's any color, any actual buds that are popping open. If they're all sealed up tight, you can still spray. If you see pink or color on the buds, then you have to wait. And there are ways around it too. If you've got 4 or 5 buds that are about ready to open, you can cut those buds off and still spray. But if the flowers are open, I just recommend not spraying anything at all. There are different types of azaleas. Your deciduous or sun types get quite a bit larger. The deciduous azaleas are kind of cool because they're usually scented as well. So better for the bees and great for the gardener who comes to smell. The evergreen azaleas are really nice because they do retain their leaves in wintertime. They bloom really, really heavily, but they're usually a little bit smaller also.
When do you prune them?
These guys you prune just right after flower usually. They will create buds and carry those buds through winter. So you don't want to prune too late or you'll wind up cutting flowers off for next year. As far as azaleas go, there are several reblooming varieties that you can buy these days. If you look for the Encore series, you'll see Encore on the tag. They will have a heavy bloom in spring, and then they will also have a secondary bloom in fall. So good for the pollinators, good for the gardeners. Any kind of color you can think of, we've probably got an azalea for it. Pink, red, purple, candy stripes, all sorts of different things.
Which ones did you say were the more fragrant ones?
The more fragrant are the deciduous azaleas, which are usually quite a bit larger also. So they lose their leaves, but they have a smell. So we're kind of swapping features there. Rhododendron. Rhododendron is in some ways easier than azalea. They are technically all rhododendrons. Azaleas are rhodies. Rhodies are not azaleas. So it's squares and rectangles here. Azaleas are a specialty form of rhododendron. Azaleas are less deer tolerant though, so it's important to note. Rhododendrons are extremely deer tolerant. Azaleas are just a little bit tastier. The deer still don't really want to go for them, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily deer tolerant. There are a couple of Oregon native rhododendrons. You may see them up in the mountains or in southern Oregon. So that's Rhododendron occidentalis down here at the bottom with that really, really cool flower shape down here. They are evergreen. They love acidic soil. They're fairly drought tolerant. So be careful if you're watering these guys a lot. They are rather prone to root rot when you overwater. Early flowering, sweet box. This is what I was talking about earlier. That's a really good boxwood substitute. There are different types of sweet box. You can get the Himalayan version, which is quite small, or you can get Ruscifolia, which is quite a bit larger. So an 18-inch round variety or a 5 to 6 foot variety that's good for hedging. They look just kind of like this most of the year, just kind of green and a little bit boring sometimes, but great for hedging. They will flower somewhere around in February usually. And they are just the strongest smelling things. Between Sarcocopa and Daphne, I'd say those are probably the strongest scents that we have for shade. I suppose gardenia is pretty fragrant too. And gardenia is another really good one, but we'll talk about that one later. Oh, another reason it's a good boxwood substitute. Boxwoods these days have all sorts of different diseases and issues. Boxwood blight has been killing a lot of boxwoods worldwide. Sweet box does not share this disease, so it's a very disease tolerant plant. Pieris or Japanese Andromeda, extremely drought tolerant. This is a really commonly bonsai shrub actually, just because it has beautiful shape, beautiful flowers. The flowers set on them right around now, so it looks like they're going to rebloom in fall, and everybody gets really excited about it. But really, they're just going to have those flowers over winter, and then they're gonna pop up again in early spring. Wide spectrum of light tolerance. You can see these guys in terrible soil in the full sun. You can see these guys in really nice loamy soil in the shade. They are just easy keepers. As long as you have some good acidity to the soil, they're going to be happy. Pink bellflowers or white bellflowers, depending on variety. Bumblebees love these guys. Hummingbirds will go after them also. Oregon grape, another Oregon native. This is actually our state flower as well. They are evergreen. Some of them have pokey leaves, some of them have soft leaves, depending on variety. Repens and nervosa varieties are both ground covers. They'll spread very, very quickly and get either 1 or 2 feet tall. The one in the photo here, this is Mahonia aquifolium. This is the tall Oregon grape. It's very skinny, gets about 4 to 5 feet tall, but they all spread with rhizome roots. So make sure you've got the space. They will spread into everything. I had a couple of raised bed gardens with no bottoms in them at one point with Oregon grape on the side. I learned very quickly that they know exactly where the fertilizer goes. They do have edible fruit, not necessarily palatable, but if you've got kids around, dogs around, not going to hurt anybody in your yard. And it's also a decent padding for different jellies and things. Oh yes, good winter color too. The leaves will actually turn different shades of red. So pretty all times of year. Spring and winter camellias are quite different, so be careful when you're picking out a camellia, what time does it bloom? Your spring camellias are typically anywhere between 6 and 12 feet, depending on variety. A lot of your spring camellias can come in slightly smaller varieties too. They are evergreen. Some varieties can make efficient privacy screening with just a little bit of training. Other varieties really do require trellising. So make sure to read the tag when you're taking a look at them and just kind of look at the growth habit too. It's pretty obvious when you've got this huge stringy vine that it's going to need a little extra support. Avoid double flowering types like the one that you see up here. It's difficult to reach the nectaries. It's still possible, but it's just a little bit more work than a lot of your pollinators really need in that time of year. Anna's hummingbird will go after these because there's not a whole lot else blooming when these guys are in bloom. Anna's hummingbirds will really look for these. So looking at late flowering shade plants, there's not a whole lot of late flowering shade plants out there that we have on site. Your fall and winter camellias, anywhere between 3 and 12 feet tall. Evergreen, very, very acidic soil. October Magic series are the smaller varieties. You can find some purple haze that are around 4 feet tall also. So you don't have to have a 12-foot Setsugeka. You can have a couple different ones as well. Gardenias. You hear that gardenias are notoriously difficult to maintain. They're not that bad, but they are kind of on the edge of a hardiness zone. So there's a couple different varieties that do particularly well in Pacific Northwest. All of them are extremely fragrant. The flowers are similar. The Frostproof almost has kind of a double flower here. Chuck Hayes has got a really nice compact flower with open nectaries. And Klein's Hardy is just showing it to everybody. Like, all right, come and get the pollen. These guys have got really, really fragrant flowers though. Klein's Hardy, Frostproof, and Chuck Hayes have slightly different sizes and configurations. So if you're looking for a round shrub versus a more upright shrub, you may want to get one over the other. A couple different leaf types on here too. Be really careful with these. Certain spider mites and things really like them. So pay attention when you're pruning them, when you're watering them, whatever you're doing with them. Take a look at the undersides of the leaves and look for that kind of dirty, sooty stuff. And it's probably worth spraying these guys once or twice a year just to keep them healthy. Again, when they are not in flower. So now we've got a couple of ideas. You want to consider everything we talked about, consider what kind of space you have. Do I want to plant something huge? Do I want to plant something a little bit smaller? What color scheme am I going for? Do I want things to match? Do I want things to pop? Think about light requirements in soil. Do I have a really wet area? Do I have a really bright area, a really dark area? What is going to make me as a gardener happy? That's probably one of the most important things. If you don't like the plant's not going to do well. And it's just a vicious cycle. So make sure that you enjoy what you're planting here as well. Try a couple plants here and there. It does not have to be done in a day. It's a lot more fun in my mind to come to the garden center, pick up 1 or 2 things, throw it down there. All right, it's doing well, or maybe something different. And it's just kind of an ongoing fun project. Almost kind of like a hobby. And you can always move things. Take a tour of your local nurseries. Many of the nurseries in the area will do this, but we usually have a couple different tables specifically for either pollinators or honeybees in particular, or hummingbirds. So we've got a couple different tables that you can look at, and you can find all different things that are blooming different times of the year. A couple of printed resources you may be interested in. 100 Plants to Feed the Bees by Xerces Society. All sorts of cool things in here. They actually have it separated organ natives and ornamental varieties too, so that's kind of a neat thing. Nectar and Pollen Plants of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. This is an illustrated guide and has some really important information in there. One of the top pollinator books in my mind, especially for our very specific area. When you're looking for printed resources for pollinator plants, a lot of them are very general. Like, oh, well, this plant only grows up in New York. Not really helpful here in the Pacific Northwest. So if we're looking for more specific resources, these two books can be really handy. All right, so I think that's brings us to the end of the class. I'd like to take everybody out for a tour if you'd like. Give me a call, send me an email. This is going to be posted on YouTube later on as well, so you can check it out on our YouTube page. And thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.